My life had always been simple. I lived in a small American subdivision, the kind where every lawn looked like it came straight out of a magazine. Perfectly trimmed grass, white fences, and neighbors who pretended everything was perfect. But behind that perfect picture was a nightmare, the Homeowners Association, the infamous HOA. And at the center of it all was the president, Margaret, though most people called her Karen. She was the kind of woman who thrived on control, handing out fines like candy, enforcing rules that nobody cared about, and humiliating anyone who dared to cross her. My crime? Owning a Jeep. But my Jeep wasn't just a Jeep. On the outside, it looked like an old military-style vehicle, rugged, bulky, maybe even a little out of place in a polished neighborhood. But the truth was far deeper. That Jeep was part of a police task force operation. I wasn't a full-time cop, but I volunteered with a joint task force that worked on undercover stings against smugglers and drug traffickers. The Jeep was a crucial piece of equipment. Inside, it carried radio surveillance trackers and even secret compartments. To me, it wasn't just a car. It was my mission, my responsibility, and my service to the community. But Margaret, she saw only an eyesore. It started with notes on my door. Your vehicle does not comply with community standards. Remove this eyesore immediately. You are subject to daily fines if this vehicle remains. I tried to explain. I told her that this Jeep was part of important work and that I couldn't simply move it or get rid of it. But she didn't care. She cut me off mid-sentence one day and snapped. This neighborhood has rules. Either you comply or I will handle it myself. Her words weren't just a warning. They were a promise. One night, after a long shift, I parked the Jeep in my driveway, locked it up with a heavy-duty chain, and went inside. The night was quiet, for a while. Then I heard it clank, clink, snap. I looked out my window, and my stomach dropped. Margaret, the HOA president herself, was outside with two men. They had bolt cutters in their hands, and sparks flew as they cut through my lock. "This piece of junk won't be here tomorrow," she hissed to her helpers. They yanked the lock free, pulled open the Jeep's door, and started to climb in. What Margaret didn't know was that the Jeep wasn't just armored, it was wired. The moment the door opened, a hidden alarm blared, a piercing sound that shook the entire block. More importantly, a silent distress signal shot straight to police headquarters. Within minutes, flashing blue and red lights filled the street. For patrol cars swarmed in, officers jumped out, and suddenly Margaret and her men were surrounded. An officer barked, "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where we can see them." Margaret, arrogant as ever, threw her arms up but shouted back, "This car is violating HOA rules. I have every right to remove it." The officer raised an eyebrow, almost laughing. "Ma'am, this is not just a car. You just attempted to steal a federal task force vehicle." Her face went pale. "That's impossible. I didn't know." The officer's voice was sharp. "Ignorance is an excuse. You tampered with federal property. Do you have any idea how serious the situation is?" For the first time, Margaret didn't have an answer. Her power, her confidence, gone. That night, in front of the entire neighborhood, the HOA president was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser. Her two helpers faced charges as well. The charges? Breaking and entering, destruction of property, attempted grand theft auto, and interference with federal law enforcement. The neighbors stood in silence, watching the queen of the HOA, the woman who once terrorized them with fines and threats, reduced to a criminal. Some of them even smiled. I walked up to my Jeep, placed my hand on the hood, and whispered to myself, "You were never just a car. Tonight, you showed everyone who you really belonged to." The following weeks changed everything. Margaret was removed as HOA president. Facing criminal charges, her reputation crumbled, and she quietly moved out of the neighborhood. For the first time in years, the community could breathe. A new president was elected. Someone fair, someone who actually cared about people instead of rules. As for my Jeep, it became a local legend. Kids would walk by and point, "Hey, that's the Jeep that took down Karen." Neighbors who once avoided me started to wave, smile, and even thank me. Some admitted they had been victims of her bullying too, but they had been too scared to fight back. The The Jeep was no longer an eyesore. It was a symbol of justice. Sometimes people drunk on power forget an important truth. Control is an illusion. Margaret thought she could bend rules, humiliate people, and even steal something that didn't belong to her. But what she didn't realize was that she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She thought she was enforcing order, but in reality, she was breaking the very law she claimed to uphold. And when you mess with the wrong Jeep, a Jeep that belongs to the police task force, you don't just lose your power, you lose everything.